Ring ring, it's time for another episode of Crossplay Conversations, the show where we dive deep into the world of video games while keeping it light. I'm your host this week, Luke Lewis, and today I am joined by my co-host, the sneaker savant. It's Joseph Hooper.
What's up, everybody? You know what? I'm not going to show off a sneaker today because Jacob's not here and it just doesn't feel right without everybody in attendance.
That's fair. Jacob is trapped in the dark place. He has to finish all of Insomniac's Spider-Man games before he can escape, so he's off doing that. In the meantime, we have two wonderful special guests joining the show. We have co-host of the Fun and Games podcast. It's friend of the show, Matt Storm.
Hey, what's going on? Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. You've been on the top of the guest list since we started the show, so excited to make it happen for this one. And then rounding out our quartet, we have co-host of Cutscenes, a video game movie podcast, and the Left Behind Game Club. It's Katie Lesperance.
Hello. It's my first crossplay conversation as well. I'm pretty excited.
I think y'all are like the first official guests. Like we did our kind of round table at PAX West with like a bunch of short introductions for folks, but this is like proper episode. We're all at home. Super excited to have you. How's everybody doing?
Doing good. Tired
Nice.
a little bit, but other than that,
Yes.
doing all right.
Thumbs up, though.
Heck yeah.
A little tired, a little terrified. It's fine.
Little tired,
that's
little
the mood.
terrified, which is a great segue into our topic. So tonight we are talking about Alan Wake 2, which we've all been playing. We're going to start with some spoiler-free review impressions, and then in the back half of the show, we're just going to let the floodgates up and talk about the story in depth, talk about all of our favorite moments, make some speculations. I have a lot of questions of just like thematic interpretation of stuff because this is a pretty wild game, so I'm excited to dig into it with y'all. But let's kick things off with our icebreaker question. I'm curious for each of you, what's your history with Remedy Entertainment? Have you played their games previously? What's kind of each of us? We can go around. Maybe start with Katie.
So I played Max Payne and Max Payne 2 back in the day. I had no, knowledge or awareness that it was a Remedy game. I just knew that it was a cool shooter, like third-person shooter with some surreal kind of vibes to it that I really liked. And then I've played Control, which I adore Control. And I have never played the first Alan Wake because people talk, people like it, but there's like, it's kind of a spooky game, and I didn't hear this like overwhelming Alan Wake is this amazing game that you must play. So as a like scaredy gamer, I was like, I could probably not, because I reserve that for like very, very good games. If it's going to scare me, it's got to be like top tier.
For sure. How about for you, Matt?
So my first conscious Remedy game that I played was Control. I didn't know Remedy super well. Like I was aware of them, but I didn't know that was their game until I had picked it up. I got it about a year after it came out and fell in love with it. I'm someone who grew up watching the X-Files and loved all that stuff. And so I ate it up. And then once I beat it, it was before the Alan Wake DLC came out. I found out that Alan Wake was a connected world. And so I was like, all right, well, I never played Alan Wake, and I was streaming at the time, and I had recently streamed Dead Space and like starting to get more comfortable with horror games. So I was like, why don't I stream the original Alan Wake and I'll play through it. And I loved it. Combat aside, the combat has not aged well, but the game, the story is great.
That's
the writing. And then after that, the DLC came out. I went back to Control to play that DLC, which I loved. And then when Alan Wake 2 was announced, I was very excited. And then when they said it was a survival horror game, I was immediately disappointed because at the time I didn't consider myself a horror fan. I've kind of come around on that, but like I was just afraid to play it. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick up this game and I'm going to play it. And I'd played some other horror games this year that really like opened my eyes to, oh, maybe you can be a coward and still like horror games. And so I played games like Iron Lung and Signalis. And so I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to give Alan Wake a fair shock. And it scared the hell out of me, but it was incredible and I really loved it. And I've not played the Max Payne games, though I have recently started playing Max Payne 1 on my Steam Deck. And so we'll see. I'm excited to play it, mostly because I've seen that Sam Lake face like for so many years, like that iconic face, and so I'm excited to finally play it. But yeah, I've not played their whole catalog yet, and I do want to go back now that I've loved these three games as much as I have.
Very cool. Joseph?
Yeah, so my Remedy days begin back on the Xbox 360 with the original Alan Wake. I think I learned about it through G4, like watching Cheat or something. I was like, oh, this looks interesting. So I played it. And going back to like re-review what happened in the first one by watching YouTube videos and stuff, I was too young to play that game because I did not get any of the subtext or anything like that. But I was not too young to play Control, which is one of my favorite games of like the past decade. I am a big nerd when it comes to like little Easter eggs and like universe building and like little secrets and stuff that make you feel smart as you uncover stuff. So I really fell in love with Control, and that was kind of the first inkling of me thinking, oh man, Remedy might have the stuff. And Alan Wake 2 is here, and we'll see what I think about Remedy after this. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. We'll see.
Interesting. Okay, planting some seeds. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. Alan Wake was my first Remedy game. I didn't play the Max Payne games as a kid, and then I ended up just falling in love with Alan Wake, which like I'm not sure how I discovered it. To your point, Joseph, you mentioned G4. Like it must have been something like that for me, or like a Game Informer review, because like on paper it doesn't really resemble anything I was playing at the time, like a lot of open world games, a lot of shooters, a lot of like sports games or action platformers, and then you throw this survival horror game. But there was something about like the camp and the weird humor and the characters, and I also thought that was like the first game I ever played that was set in the Pacific Northwest, and as somebody who grew up in Oregon and Washington, it was like, oh my god, this feels like weirdly familiar and like a creepy interesting way. And so yeah, combat aside, I think the story is incredibly interesting, and then watching the recap videos, I also was like, I don't think I picked up on any of this symbolism at the time. I was just like, this is campy and weird, and Barry's wearing Christmas lights, what is this game? But yeah, when Alan Wake 2 specifically was announced, I like lost my mind because it just was a game that I never thought we would see a sequel. I never thought we would see a sequel to this level of production. So super excited to chat more about it. And then I did play Control. I'm in the weird group that never finished Control, not because I didn't like it. I did. It just came out like a weird time in my life. But now after playing Alan Wake 2, I really want to double back and play Control, play all the DLC, maybe then replay Alan Wake 2, which we'll get into why that's relevant. But yeah, really interesting series of games and doing a lot of bold things, a lot of interesting things, which you don't always see in games. Sometimes a sequel is like very paint by numbers, but I think Remedy is like very innovative on their own stuff, which is cool.
Was I the only one who played the remaster in preparation for this game? It sounds like I was.
You were.
Yes.
I had it downloaded, and my partner Claire and I, she had never played it, and she loves shows like Fringe and X-Files, and I was like, I think you'd really like the narrative piece of Alan Wake, gameplay aside, and so we were going to, but we didn't get to it. So I was thinking maybe next like Halloween, spooky season. But how was the remaster? How did it hold up?
I mean, again, I'm not a huge fan of the combat, but I'm also bad at shooters generally, so it could be a me problem. But the story holds up. They kind of improve the character models, obviously, and we'll get into this, but like there's a separate facial actor, like mocap actor for Alan Wake versus voice actor, and like they updated the face model so it looks more like the Alan Wake 2 face model. It's smoother, the audio sounds great. Like it wasn't a huge overhaul. The controls were made a tiny bit tighter, but I think all in all, if you want to play Alan Wake, the remaster is the way to play it, and it's on everything. It's on PlayStation, Xbox, even Switch. I hear it runs pretty well on Switch.
Okay.
But yeah, it's probably the definitive way to play it, just because they didn't make huge changes, and there's like the old one I only played 2 or 3 years ago, and that held up perfectly well, so I don't think it's a requirement to buy the remaster. But if you don't own it, you might as well get the remaster because it's just an improved version of an already pretty solid game.
Nice. All right, we've waited long enough. I think we need to talk about Alan Wake 2 specifically. I'd love to hear everyone's kind of general spoiler-free overall impressions of their time with the game and what they think so far. Maybe start with you, Joseph.
Sure. So I might be the odd man out here, but Alan Wake is an incredible game.
Let's go,
baby. Okay, all
Let's
right.
go.
You had me.
Yeah, I had to had to plant the seeds, do a little suspense in the honor of Alan Wake 2. But yeah, I love this game. Just overall impressions, I would say that, you know, I often say I love great writing in games, but at the same time, when you really look around at the field each year, there's not that many games with genuinely great writing, right? Writing that can stand toe to toe with a, decent TV show or a movie or whatever. Remedy has proven not once, but twice, some would argue 3 times if we're including Alan Wake 1 in there, that, hey, we can stand toe to toe with basically anybody when it comes to creating media and like interweaving stories and hiding themes within the general plot. And I think Alan Wake is one of the best examples of that. Being old enough to appreciate all of the different little references they are making towards archetypes and the process of creating art and all of these other different things and all these struggles and mental hurdles that you have to like tackle as a creator, I think is just so genius the way that they present it. And it almost kind of feels like Kingdom Hearts, but in not a messy way, where like the more you dig at the story and the more you unpack the layers, it's just like never ending. It's like a Russian nesting doll where it's like, oh, you have an answer here, but that just only makes more questions. The reason I love that is because you can tell that they have a very clear blueprint where they want to go with a lot of this stuff. Just by looking at Control in comparison to this game, there's a lot of connect the dots you can do, and it all starts to make sense the more you play. And adding on top of that, just incredible game design moments, incredible visual moments that, story aside, even if the story was, baby nonsense that is just like low tier whatever, the visuals and the gameplay and how they immerse you in the situations that you're in are like, I mean, best in class in my opinion. Like the way they build tension, the way that they like set up the mountain range, and makes me think, is that Mount Rainier out there? As Luke might know, like I'm like, dude, is that literally Mount Rainier? I don't know. So like, I just think all around the world they built here is just like top notch. Like I have very few complaints besides the combat. The combat is like serviceable, but I think that's the only thing that's not like at that S tier level in this game.
Heck yeah. How about for you, Katie?
I basically agree with everything that was just said. Yeah, the combat it's fine. I enjoy it, but I'm not going to point to it and say like, oh my god, they're doing things that other games aren't. Like it is a third person kind of, I wouldn't say clunky, but it's a little bit rigid. Like it does the job. It's enjoyable to play. It's not a negative for me. It doesn't detract from the game. I think the biggest thing is, like you said, just like innovation, being inventive in your story, how you're portraying it to the person, how to the player, how as you get older, as you're a more mature gamer, I feel like you are a gamer. God, but I feel like you've played a lot of games. You've had a lot of stories presented to you in video game format, and they don't necessarily always surprise you that much. Not only in the actual story, like front to back story, but also like how it's presented to you. And I find myself surprised all the time. Not only in, suspense thriller aspect, but just of the way that we're weaving around and how eerie it is. I think that's my biggest thing, is like just the tone is so just creepy and eerie and surreal, and I'm bought in. But then it's goofy too. Like it does these funny little things, and it's slipping in characters from other games, not even its own franchise, but they're like seamlessly just kind of put in there, and I like it. Yeah, I like how much fun I feel like they had making it for a survival horror game. I'm like, oh, you guys, you all had a lot of fun making this game, and I feel like you were just like spitballing ideas, or like, what if we did this? And if someone's like, yes, like I feel like they just said like yes and to everything, but it's still thoughtful. It's not just like haphazard. It's a really good game, which is good because I'm a scaredy cat. And if a horror game is not excellent, I will bail out because I need to be right in.
For sure.
So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm the only one of the four of us who have not finished it. I am probably approaching 2/3 of the way through, and I'm really excited to see what it has left for me.
That's awesome. To your point about the tone, it's like, it's just such a weird game, and I mean that in a positive way. And I feel like if any other developer tried to do this level of like meta narrative, crossing paths with other games, creating this overall universe, I feel like we would all universally say like, this is too much. This is just, but like they pull it off in such a unique way that like, yeah, this is really special. How has your time with the game been, Matt?
I mean, I loved it. So the thing about Remedy that I love is, and that I, even only having played 3 of their games, I can see it in others, is the common complaint I see often is the controls or the gameplay isn't always 100% great. But never have I seen a complaint about anything else. Even games that haven't done as well, like Quantum Break, which you mentioned earlier, which we all want to play at this point, but none of us have. Like, I heard that the acting was great, the mocap was great, the story was great. Well, the gameplay was fine. And so, like, honestly, I can do a lot with a game. The gameplay is important to a game, and I don't want to say that it's not, but I think what this game has in spade, and also to say I agree with everything said so far, like, I'm not going to retread it, but like, totally. I think something that Remedy does that other studios don't do as well is how they seamlessly incorporate diegetic and non-diegetic music in some brilliant ways, and we'll talk about that. But also the way they use actors. And like, for those who don't know, since the early days of Max Payne, they've used real people to play the characters. And like, even the like cutscenes in Max Payne that are like still comic book panels, Sam Lake is playing Max Payne in those scenes, making faces and all of that. And it's only evolved since. And like, especially in Control, they didn't really do this in Alan Wake 1, but since Control, they've been incorporating live action actors with the characters they're based on. And you saw it a lot, not as much as in this game, but a lot in Control, like Jessie Faden and her actress would, like, there'd be scenes where she's freaking out and they actually filmed her. And this game just takes that to the next level. Ilka, who plays the face of Alan Wake, did so much on-screen actual work in this game. It's practically half movie. And it's really brilliantly done. And it never feels like, oh, I'm just sitting and watching this game. It feels integral to the narrative and the way they're telling the stories. And I think that's what sets Remedy apart now, is that they've always taken real life, quote unquote, into their games in a way that other studios weren't. Because like, it's one thing to model your in-game characters after live actors. Like, we've been doing that for a long time. Even had it in Spider-Man 2. But in this game, they're not just doing that. They're actually filming live scenes. And to Katie's point, it looks like they're having a blast. And like, there's a segment I don't want to talk about yet that like is probably not only my favorite moment in gaming this year, but might be one of my favorite moments in games ever, only rivaled by, and I'll say 2 words to not spoil it, but Joseph will know what I'm talking about, the ashtray maze. The ashtray maze in Control is one of my favorite things in gaming ever. But the thing that we're not talking about here that happens in Alan Wake 2 rivals it. Like, it's almost better because I'm a music nerd, and we'll get to that. But like, yeah, I think nobody's operating writing wise and cinematic wise and story building wise like Remedy. And I love a built world. Like, I've talked about on other podcasts how I'm kind of exhausted by the MCU. Still have faith that there's going to be some good that comes out of it, but like, tired because there's so much of it. But like, I still love a connected world, and when there's a reference, I go, cool. Like, I'm only human. And like, when they did it here, especially considering how much I love Control, and Control being one of my top 10 games of all time, like, I love this world they're building, and I just immediately want more of it.
To that point,
yeah, for sure.
Like, to both of those points, the FMV parts and also referencing other games and pulling them into a universe, I feel like this gets attempted in other games. Like, I feel like there are other games I can think of that have like FMV moments that pull in, or even if you think back to like early 90s games and their cutscenes were FMV and they had actors. Remedy does it so well that they're integrated so well. It could be jarring to jump from the CGI'd Alan Wake to the FMV acted Alan Wake, and it's not. It and I think that's partly because it's already kind of a surreal game, so you can pull that off a bit better. But yeah, it's done so well. And then what's the other thing you just mentioned? Just talked about it.
The music. Ashtray
In any case, they integrate things into their games that could be jarring and not mesh well, but they pull it off. Like, they always manage to pull it off. Even pulling in other characters, like pulling in Jesse Faden, but it makes sense in the story, right? When they reference other characters, it makes perfect sense. Like, I mean, we'll probably get into it later, but it's not just, for the sake of it. It services the story.
Yeah, well, I think also to the FMV part, like Immortality, which admittedly I haven't played, but I've heard great things about, is all FMV. And I find that the best FMV games now are just that, right? They are just doing that. But it's specifically what you said, Katie, about the integration of it that might be jarring elsewhere that is just not here. It's smooth, like the way, and again, you're right. It's because to not mince words, Control and Alan Wake, those universes are batshit crazy. And because they are, you can kind of do anything. And I love that, like there is a genius to Sam Lake. I don't want to get too much into a tour theory, but like, I think there's a genius to Sam Lake and his team that I just don't see elsewhere, that I just don't see anyone else trying.
Luke, I promise I'll let you give your opinions.
You're good, buddy. Go for it.
To add into this, I think the interesting thing about this whole conversation and looking at Remedy is that, I know we talk about the actual gameplay being serviceable or the combat or whatever, but I think when you look at games as a whole and the idea of game development, like, there is definitely a lot of diminishing returns where when we look at the gameplay aspect, pretty much in almost any genre, like, you can only improve on so much because every year, most games are doing something with the gameplay that is just improving on the genre as a whole. But on the flip side, I feel like where we haven't seen as big of strides is definitely in the storytelling aspect, in the character portrayal aspect. And that's why games like Last of Us and God of War 2018 really hit in a big way, because people are like, whoa, I didn't realize that stories could be told this way. I didn't realize emotion could be portrayed this way. And I think Remedy takes it in a different angle where, like Matt said, like, Control is just absolutely crazy. But, in past games, we've seen that attempted before. Like, we've seen, what's the game with Travis Touchdown? No More Heroes.
No More Heroes.
Like, some games just do crazy stuff all the time. Yakuza is another franchise, but a lot of times the crazy stuff in games is just crazy for the sake of crazy. In Alan Wake, it's really nice to have a story, and even in Control as well, a story where things are weird and things are off, but it's all serving a purpose and it's clearly building to something. And I kind of reference it, like, when I think of two movies that I really like, stick with me here, Midsummer and Isle of Dogs, right? Those are two movies that I had no idea what they were going to generally be about when I went in. And within the first like 5 or 10 minutes, something ridiculous happens. And it's kind of that point where you're like, oh yeah, I'm in. I'm in for this ride. Like, this is so weird and I need to figure out where we're going with this. And it totally delivers the whole way. Alan Wake is 100% that same thing, where you're seeing the first live action character or crazy thing that's happening in this world, and you're like, oh yeah, we got to figure out where this ends, man. We got to figure it out. So I think Remedy are experts at that.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, Joseph, just like the level of intentionality is just it's out of this world. And I think in this day and age, when we have countless sequels and countless like games trying to ape what other games are doing, like for example, I love Spider-Man 2 this year. I adore that game. I think it's a wonderful game, but like, it is more Spider-Man. Whereas like, even as being a big fan of the original Alan Wake, like, that game wasn't hitting on all the cylinders that I think this new one is. And the live action bits, I think, and it's kind of like the trifecta of the live action bits, the integration of the music in the original songs and just like the general art direction of this game, it just like, I don't think I've ever played a game like this. The closest thing I can think of to a point you mentioned earlier, Matt, about Immortality, which I really loved last year, that like, I think the art direction and the level of production in that game is very comparable, but this game is like integrating gameplay and different systems in such a way that like, this is just like far and away like the weirdest, most bold, like most interesting game I don't want to say ever played because that feels too hyperbolic, but just like definitely in the conversation for sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those games that, like, if it came out any other year, it'd be my game of the year. It's not this year, but it's damn close. And yeah, also to Joseph's point, yeah, like this is for the movie comparison, like Everything Everywhere All at Once was that movie for me, right? Like,
Yeah,
100%.
which it was for a lot of, like, you see it, a bonkers thing happens in the first 20 minutes, and then you're like, oh, I gotta know where this goes.
Sure.
I don't even care. And this is, I agree that it's that cinematic quality. Like, we like to use that term a lot, and I'm not discounting stuff like God of War and Last of Us, but I think they feel cinematic in like a safe way, and that's not a bad
traditional
thing, but like
sense.
right. Thank
like
you, Katie.
realistic or trying to
Right.
emulate realistic.
It's
Yeah,
traditional storytelling.
sure.
I guess.
And I like non-traditional storytelling better because, like, I just like the wacky stuff. I mean, it's why, like you mentioned it earlier, Joseph, the Yakuza franchise is one of my favorite franchises of all time, and it's mostly because they are not afraid to go buck wild, and definitely this game has that too.
I'm curious for everyone. We've mentioned a couple times that this is a survival horror game, and how for most of us that's not our typical genre. I'm curious, like, how do you think it compares to traditional survival horror? Would you recommend folks still play it? Because I feel like this is one of those games this year that's like, if you follow video games, if you enjoy narrative experiences, like, I would highly recommend it, but there are some caveats. So I'm curious what y'all think. How about for you, Katie? Because I know you specifically mentioned like Scaredy Cat, not horror isn't your thing particularly.
I'm so conflicted with. I love survival horror, just as far as game mechanics go, because I like
Sure.
like an action adventure game, but I like one where you have to be intentional about what you're doing and the resources that you're using, and when you are getting loot, it is valuable. Like, it is always valuable. And I'm going, okay, good, I have more of this. I like that, like, thoughtful action adventure games. And I like horror to a point. I feel my first like real, like, big girl survival horror game was probably RE2 Remake. I was like, you know what? Everyone's talking about how amazing this game is. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna battle my way through, and I did it, and I really, really enjoyed it, and that kind of opened the door into survival horror games, and I really like them. Like, I want to go back, and I never played Dead Space. I want to play the Dead Space remake. This one, I don't know if Alan Wake 2 is scarier than RE2 Remake. It might be. I don't know. We'll see. Apparently, I'm at the scariest part of the game, so I guess it'll kind of determine how I feel about that. But it's if you cannot handle horror in any sense, then I don't think you'll be able to get through the game. But if you're kind of like, I can do it a little bit, I can dabble. If the game's really good, I can get through. Then yes, I would recommend giving it a shot for sure. But yeah, it's if you're not in at all, then I don't know. You might have to just kind of YouTube it or something.
It's also worth throwing out too that there's I didn't play on this difficulty, but there's like a story mode specific difficulty that's like less geared towards combat being intense and is supposedly easier to get through. Did you play on that mode, Matt?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I struggled with the combat in the first boss fight and said, you know what? I don't care anymore. I mean,
Fair.
if you listen to me on literally any podcast, I will be the first to say that difficulty being a gatekeeping tool is BS.
Oh, yeah, no.
And
play
so,
it how you want to play, 100%.
And so the minute, like, I like challenge. I played all the Metroid games. I played through Elden Ring. Like, I like a challenge. But also, when I'm playing a game like this where I'm already not loving the combat, I don't think twice. And I agree with Katie. I think as someone who is a recent horror fan, I use that term very loosely. If for those following Fun and Games on our Patreon, I've been writing articles, and I wrote an article this month, as of when we're recording, about it's called Matt's Musings: Confessions of a Coward, How I Learned to Love Horror Games, and it's
nice.
me kind of like outlining my rise to a horror game fan. And part of what helped me with that is listening to a podcast. Shout out to Tales from the Backlog. They were doing an episode about why we love survival horror, and like two or three of the guests were like, "Oh, I'm a coward. This shit scares the hell out of me." I was like, and it like kind of just broke my brain. Like I realized, wait, you can be scared and like horror, which seems obvious, but like to me it took a minute, and that kind of sent me on the path to play this game. But I agree with Katie, this game is one of the scariest games I've ever played. Now admittedly it's a small pool, but like I've played Dead Space, I'm playing through RE2 remake very slowly. And so like this is scary. I think that if you can't handle horror, like if it really like makes you uncomfortable or sick or makes you anxious, like because there were times I think for all of us where we're like, I think I'm done for tonight. I gotta put this on pause. And so if you can't like come back to a game after that, I don't recommend this. However, again, if you're like curious or you want to like push through or like test yourself, it's one of the best horror games I've played. Admittedly a small pool, but for sure, besides Iron Lung, probably the best horror experience I've ever had. So I definitely would recommend it on those same caveats, though.
Yeah. I would say that there's nothing in this game that will traumatize you. Like you finish playing it and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened or whatever. But this game is still very incredibly scary. And this is coming from a guy who loves horror movies. Like I love horror movies. I try and watch as many interesting horror movies as I can. But on the game side, like it's hard to, like for horror movies, I'm like, it's just a movie. This can never happen in real life. Games immerse you in a way where it's hard to make that separation in your brain. And I think Alan Wake is very good at making it hard to make that separation in your brain, just because of the level of detail in both the visual standpoint and the audio standpoint, where a lot of times the reason I was scared is because I'm in this darkly or this like poorly lit environment, whether it's nighttime or I'm underground or wherever. And I start just hearing stuff, and I know there's people out there. I might be able to see somebody out there, and the stuff that they're saying is just like nonsensical, or they're saying wake, and I'm like, yo, that's me, bro. That's me. They're coming for me. What is going on?
Freaking killed me.
Yeah. So I mean, like, it's just like almost impossible to like overcome that. If you're just scared of that stuff, no matter, unless you know exactly what's coming, it's hard to overcome that stuff, even if you turn the combat down, because a lot of times it wasn't a fight that scared me, and I died in a lot of the fights because like Matt said, that first boss fight, I was like, wait a second, what's going on here? Like after dying like 3 or 4 times, I'm good. Like I'm like, okay, I just need to finish this. But like most of the scary parts are like me going into a new location for the first time and just not knowing where the corners are and where people are hiding. And let me tell you, they're hiding everywhere. They're coming out of every little cubby and shadow. So
yeah, once the combat is happening, it's aside from that first boss fight, because the entire time I would squeal and then giggle and then squeal and then giggle because it just keeps happening. But once I'm in the combat, I will occasionally go like, still, it's still terrifying sometimes when they kind of come, when you don't expect one and you're like, oh, there's one right there and I didn't know. But for the most part, that wasn't what's scary, right? It's the build up. It's the when nothing's happening and the music is building and you're like, why is the music building? Nothing's happening. What's going to happen? The music is building and I don't like it. Like that's the stuff. And the little sounds, the audible sounds. Where I am currently, there's someone, I can distantly hear someone yelling and I don't know where they are or what's going to happen and I don't like it. It's that stuff. It's the tone setting. It's the music. Oh, the music is terrifying to me. And then they'll have the most fun music possible at other times where I'm like, this is a jam. And then other times, like, I hate this music. Make it stop. It's a ride. Yeah, it's a really good game.
Anytime there's like optional environments when they're like, oh, the flooding came down, you can go explore this other area, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't
No,
want to
yeah.
go
good.
into the scare.
I do
'cause,
that
like,
for
that
loot.
was the
I'll do it. I love me some
gotta
loot.
do it.
I push myself to do it for resources too, but I'm just like, that's the part I dread,
Yeah.
and that's the part that's the scariest for me. Is like, oh, I have to go back through
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a
100%.
spoiler to talk about like the New York subway because that's been
Yeah.
like heavily advertised as part of the game, but like, man, that part just like I had to stop playing that section at night and play it like during the day on the weekend, like when my partner was in the other room folding laundry, so I could be like, okay, it's okay, we're okay. this is a video game that I'm playing, because before I was playing it, the first night I got the game, I like turned off all the lights. I sat down on my couch, I put headphones on, I was like, we're gonna do this, and I was like, oh my god. But yeah, it's a pretty scary game. I would say I fall in the similar spectrum of just like, I like the horror games that I've played. I love Dead Space, I love RE2, I love RE4. But it's not my typical go-to genre, but I think this one is like, the narrative and the things that they do in the game are so interesting that like, if you're at all on the fence, I would say give it a go. Maybe do what I did and play certain sections during the day. Take your
I only
time
play
with
during
it.
the day.
Yeah, don't be afraid to like put it down. If you're like, I am terrified and this isn't fun anymore, like put it down, play it in small chunks. But like, I'd encourage folks to be brave with this one, because I do think it's really interesting. But if it's really not your thing, like no shame, like don't punish yourself. But it is very an interesting game for sure. I'm curious, kind of delving into one more question about just like setting folks up for the game if they haven't had a chance to play it yet. For those of us that have played multiple Remedy games, do you think it's necessary to play either the first Alan Wake or Control or these other titles before jumping in? Matt, how about you? I think you're the biggest super fan of the pod currently.
I mean, it's amusing being the super fan, having played 3 of the games. Well, technically, well, no, because Katie's played a bunch too. But
we've all played like
3 or 4 games.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say you don't have to play Control. The references to Control in here won't break the immersion. However, I find it hard to say play this game without Alan Wake 1. I think you can watch a recap video or like, read the synopsis of the story and you'll have most of it. But if you play the first Alan Wake, this game is very rewarding just because of the stuff they reference, the characters who do come back and who don't come back, and all of that stuff. And even Alan Wake's American Wasteland, or American Nightmare, which was the like spin-off like DLC, I think is I haven't played it, but I've heard is also helpful to have played, but is not required. But definitely the base game, which was remastered, I highly recommend. Personally, I'd say play Alan Wake, play Control, and then play this. If you don't want to do that, then at least watch a recap video of Alan Wake.
Seems fair.
I would say, as the resident time is valuable guy here, I would argue Alan Wake not necessary to play, just because I do think Alan Wake 1 to Alan Wake 2 is the God of War 2018 moment where they're almost 2 completely different games. And like, I had not remembered anything besides the bare bones details of Alan Wake 1, and I watched a recap video and I still got a lot of enjoyment out of it. What I will say is, while Control is not mandatory, especially not to play beforehand, I think either play Alan Wake 2 first and then play Control, or play Control first and then Alan Wake 2, because like, I feel like those connections, while they are very slim for the most part, like all of that felt the most satisfying to me. Like, for example, Control talks a lot about objects of power and AWEs, and while that's not like super delved into in Alan Wake outside of what we already knew coming in, like, it's still very exciting to hear people use lingo from the other game, to like hear the FBC be referenced in Alan Wake, to like all those connections, and clearly understanding that they're going to build to something greater. I think you should probably get in now before Control 2 or Alan Wake 3 comes out and you're feeling like, oh, I got to go catch up.
Yeah, I feel like Remedy is really taking off. Like, over the past, like 6 years or so, I feel like they've gone from a studio that some people like, it's a little bit niche, that some people are really big fans of, that aren't super mainstream, to now they're making, like GOTY contenders on a consistent basis. And that is wild. I watched a recap video because I was like, this is clearly, story is important to this game. I need to know a little bit of what's going on. Watched a recap video. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff, but I'm like, I got at least the opening story coming in, which I think is super necessary. I would be really lost had I not done that. So yeah, I'd highly recommend, if you're not going to play the game, to watch the recap video of Alan Wake.
That's fair. Even as someone who played the original Alan Wake, and granted that was 10 years ago, or 13 years ago, that was even longer. Part of this game and the narrative structure, I feel like, is kind of questioning what the heck is going on. Like, there's a lot of just like, what is happening, even if you have context. And I do think the one thing I'll say, I think you should play Alan Wake as well, but I will say that they set up the two playable characters of Alan and Saga in a fun way, that Saga is kind of like the new person being introduced to all of this and the universe. And so I think her character poses a lot of questions throughout the story, and she kind of represents like the player perspective of like, if you're not familiar, Saga, you'll kind of learn through Saga's experience throughout the game. So I thought that was kind of a clever way to make this game somewhat accessible to folks who have like no other context with Remedy stuff.
And I just like that it gives a lot of variety.
Yeah.
Like it as opposed to just, beelining on one story. I mean, you can play, there are two halves of the story, and then I believe they converge at some point. I don't know yet. You three will discuss that later. But I don't know where I was going with that.
No, you're
basically
good.
that you can play it in whatever order that you want. You could play all of Alan's story and then go to Saga. You could play Saga, then Alan. I've been hopping back and forth. I've basically been doing a chapter or two, depending on the length of the chapter, with one, and then going back to the other. And I really like that. It kind of, even though they're both survival horror, like they're both scary, it still feels like a little bit of a break from the other half, because one half is a little bit more surreal than the other half. So no, I like that, how they laid that out, and it seems like the story gets told well no matter what order that you play it in, which is well done. So yeah, I like that. And even though the gameplay is like a little bit different, the combat is similar. There are some different aspects to each one, but I like that, like, Saga has more puzzles. Like, I enjoy the puzzles. I'm like, there was a math puzzle today that I took out some pen and paper, and I love when a game makes me take out pen and paper. Love it.
Amazing.
Some people aren't into it, but I'm like, yes, a puzzle. I'm like, great. I'm not scared right now, because nothing, hopefully, oh god, if something attacks me during a puzzle, I'll lose my mind. But like, I'm like, I'm taking a little break. I'm going to figure this out. It's great. I like it. I like the small differences in between the two storylines.
For sure. Sorry, Joseph, were you going to say something?
I was just going to ask, Katie, is the math puzzle the one where they're talking about how many vehicles are in the factory or whatever?
Yes!
Yeah.
I gotta say, I did like 3 or 4 minutes of math, and then I was like, I really can't, man. I can't.
Really?
I have to look this up. Like, I was
Googled.
like, is it 72? It's like, nope. I'm like, okay, well, we're looking this up because
it's fair. Like, there's two variables. Like, it's not, but yeah, if you're not in the mood to like sit and puzzle it out, then I get it.
I'm looking over my shoulder, all right. I had just gotten ambushed by some wolves or whatever. I was like, I got to get out of here, man.
Yeah. That's really funny. There's one piece of gameplay that we haven't really touched on. We talked about combat a little bit, but I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on the writer's room and mind place mechanics. So a big part of the marketing for this game was kind of framing this as a detective story where you're solving the mystery and you get to interact with things. And there's very visual elements where you have like a literal like corkboard in front of you, and you're moving photos and things around with yarn and thumbtacks. And I'm curious, like, how that worked for you, how that added to the experience, or maybe it didn't, how you felt about it overall. Joseph, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but the the like Mind Place yarn board was good at first. By the time we got to the end, not good for me. Not good at all, because
Okay.
it stopped being a useful tool and it more of just became like the game was using it. The game was like, oh, I as the game need you to use this to keep going for whatever reason. Like a lot of times, like it'll help you figure out mysteries or what's going on, but just paying attention and reading the notes, I had figured these out in my head, and then all of a sudden they're putting all the cards on the board for me because I did all this stuff. I wasn't really that big of a fan because I felt like it didn't really serve any interesting gameplay purpose outside of leading you. And the game does such a good job at like putting out the narrative that you don't really need it, like the more you get information. So like I was not the biggest fan of that particular part, but I like going to the Mind Place. It was like a nice chill break. I'm in a dark forest, I go to a Mind Place to chill. On the other hand, the writer's room, almost 10 out of 10, nearly 10 out of 10. I really liked how they did that because the writer's room does have heavy gameplay implications and it does change things up. And like, as you may, it's not the yarn thing. You're more of like writing scenes in this journey that Alan is going on. Like, as you pick those, it's not like, oh yeah, pick this because it's the right answer and this will get you where you need to go. It's like, oh, you can just pick random stuff at times and it'll just change the scene. And you'll sometimes get slightly different dialogue pieces and stuff. And I'm like, this is very cool and very interesting. Felt very Control like. All of the Alan Wake stuff felt very Control like, which felt really fun and creative. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Nice. How about for you, Katie?
Pretty much agree. I don't dislike putting the things on the board in the Mind Place. It's satisfying in just like a base way of like, click, that's in place now, and like in a completionist way of watching it fill out. It feels nice, but yeah, it's not like a detective puzzle. It is a like, oh, put it there. Oh no, that's not the right spot. Okay, think about it again. Where is the other logical place that I could put this? Oh yeah, that's the right spot. It goes in. Great. And then yes, it kind of reiterates the story to you because like you said, you've already it's already either been mentioned or you already figured it out for yourself. And then Saga's like, oh, this relates to this. You're like, yeah, we knew that. Like that guy told you already.
Yeah.
I did like and she does profiling just because I'm like, what's gonna happen?
Good.
Yeah.
That was kind of fun. Just because it was unexpected. Like I don't know what these people are going to tell me. It could be anything. Although sometimes they are reiterating again. Like I kind of knew that already, but that's okay. And it's cozy. I'm like, this is a cozy place. I like being here. I like flipping through. I like checking my manuscript. Whatever I picked up. I like checking the board. Alan Wake's writing room is less cozy. I don't enjoy being there that much, but the mechanic is better. It services the game better. So I see why they're there, and I enjoy them. But yes, the corkboard twine connecting pictures, I feel like it was presented like it would be a puzzle, and it's not. And so it's like, well, when it looks like a puzzle, but then it's not a puzzle, it's like diminishing returns. But like I said, it didn't harm my experience. I wasn't like, oh god, I got the corkboard again. Like it's fine. I did it. I'm putting the things. We'll see by the end of the game if I'm more irritated by it. But right now it's fine. Yeah.
I think I'm in a similar boat. I was never irritated by it, but I think I thought we were going to be like influencing the story ourselves through it more. And I think similar to you, Joseph, the times it like broke the immersion for me was when I felt like I was ahead of the game, and I was like, well, I feel like I know where this is going. Why can't I like do this? But then I think once I like reframed what it was as more of like, this is like a visual interactive quest log more than like a gameplay mechanic.
Like check marks, like you're checking off boxes.
Yeah, like I was like, this is a visually a cool way to represent this, and I did find myself like referring back to it of like, well, which one am I missing? And I think they use it for collectibles in kind of a fun, unique way. But yeah, and I think Alan's writer's room, similar to you, Katie, didn't want to be there. I was like, this is bad vibes. I don't like it. But gameplay mechanic wise, I thought it was really interesting, really cool, really different. How about for you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree mostly. I think I liked it a little. I like them both. I like the mind place more than Joseph, but only because I never really viewed it as a solvable puzzle. I had listened to like opening thoughts about the game from like a preview that Remap had done, so I knew that it was a little finicky. But like the yarn, like when things click into place, satisfying. And
Yeah.
also, I don't like codexes in games. Don't read them. Don't look at them. Even my favorite
Sure.
game series of all time, Mass Effect. Like I like sometimes if it'll like speak to me, like if it'll read it for me, I'll listen. But like if I got to go through a codex on my own, no, ain't gonna happen unless it's like the Resident Evil style, like quick little pages. But like
Mhm.
what this alien race has done for the last 1,000 years, I can't be bothered. So the fact that here the codex was this interactable like wall, that really made it work for me.
For sure.
Also, both rooms, what they do late game with them is brilliant, and so like that really helped for me. I won't say more than that for Katie, but like I think also what I liked about the mind place is all of it, not just the corkboard that helped.
Yeah.
Like the profiling is some of the coolest stuff, and there's even stuff Katie hasn't seen yet that's cool with the profiling. And so like some of my favorite gaming moments haven't happened with the profiling too. And so like I thought that was really brilliant. I will say though, Joseph, it wasn't a break. You may have thought it was, but I found out the hard way that if there is an enemy nearby and you're in the mind
Oh,
place,
yeah.
you have not paused that game. And
Yeah.
one of the biggest jump scares I got in the entire game, because you can't, when you're in the mind place, you're in the mind place. You can't hear anything, you can't see anything until it's too late. And so like I'm profiling or working on the corkboard, and all of a sudden I hear someone yell, and then I'm being attacked and I pop out of it. Like it was horrifying. I was like, oh my god, to kill the thing. And then I hunted around the entire area, and then I went back and I was like, okay, now I can finish what I was doing.
Spooky.
I loved the writer's room more, I think, in agreement with everyone, only because the writing stuff in Alan Wake 1 is some of the best parts. Like when you're finding the manuscript pages, and like I would find the manuscript page, which would be summarized, and then I'd still open up the menu so I could hear
every
Alan
time.
read the whole manuscript page. And so like in Alan Wake 1, that was my favorite part. So in Alan Wake 2, I love doing that every time, but also being able to, like Joseph said, so what you're doing, because I don't think we explicitly said, is there are several scenes in each Alan Wake stage, and you would find several like themes or moments or characters, and you could apply them to the scenes to change them physically. And every time you do it, it kind of gets blurry, and then you hear a typewriter and the things shift. And it's just the coolest effect as like a writing nerd, as a video game nerd. And so like every time I do that, and it didn't matter if I got a thing that like I clearly didn't have to use on the room from like an hour ago, I'd still go back to that room and I'd still go use it to see what I could get if I got resources, whatever. Yeah, I think that they're both really clever mechanics. And I like when games give you a thing to do that isn't pausing the game. I think,
Yeah.
I think Alone in the Dark years ago did a thing where you looked in your bag when you wanted to change your inventory, and the game isn't paused like Resident Evil. You were literally looking in your bag. And so like I like that kind of thing. But I also can agree that towards the end of the game, you're just connecting dots. Like you're not solving puzzles with the corkboard, and I think that was the biggest disappointment, because I agree with Joseph's initial statement, like that it would have been cool to be like solving puzzles on that corkboard, and like to the point where there's a safe at one point in the game that like I solved before Saga solved, and then I found the answers to it, and I went, oh, well, all right. Like, that's
Sure,
fine.
yeah.
And then they still wanted
Yeah.
me to attach them to the corkboard. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go and do it. And that's fine. Like, it's not like, I don't think it broke the game, but it was just like a momentary, like, oh, huh, all right, well, whatever, let's keep going. Which I think, like, if they were to do this again, they could probably refine and make it much better. But as a first attempt, I think was still pretty brilliant, all in all.
Yeah, totally. And it's worth noting too, on a technical level, I was really impressed by just like the instantaneous nature of like you change the theme in the
so
writer's
cool.
room, like, or like you
Mhm.
snap into the mind place. Like I thought that worked really well, and that was really impressive.
Yeah, it only
Within
hits
the
a couple
game.
times on the PS5.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It mostly was
Technically,
seamless.
this game is, yes, excellent.
yeah.
I today had my first little bug where I'm in the forest and there are like blocks of the whole terrain that are just kind of like blocking out and for a few seconds and then coming back in. But other than that, yeah, we are seamlessly going from scene to scene. We are changing things instantaneously. It's beautiful. The
Yeah, for
flashlight
real.
is gorgeous. Like all the lighting
Yeah.
is so pretty. Even like the floor, like different like floor textures are so pretty, and the way the light is bouncing off them. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And in any other game, like they wouldn't take the time to like model the like calendar in the back of the diner by the bathroom, or like the signs on like the hiking trails, or like these little details that it's like that's really cool that they took the time to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. I recently built a PC, got a 4080 in there, and this was the perfect game to justify that purchase. Like some of my screenshots that I have, I'm like, man, this is unbelievable what they were able to accomplish. And I think probably like 80% of the legwork is that lighting system that they have in there. Like the lighting at the the sunsets are just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And to think that all of that's happening in engine, that's not a cutscene or anything like that. You're literally just walking around and you can stop and enjoy the sunset. So cool. I really enjoy it. And I think I don't know how they did this. Like Remedy, the studio Control is great, but I didn't know they had like this visual fidelity bag in their back pocket this whole time. Like they went off on this.
Yeah, I mean, like in
Heck yeah.
Control, like you're in a corporate building, and so like there were some really cool graphical moments, and like every character's face looked awesome, right? Like it's like we're talking about in this game, but it was harder to tell quite how beautiful it was. But being out in nature in this, especially like the saga areas in the woods of Bright Falls, it's just impressive on a level that I can't even put to words. And I've played a lot of graphically impressive games this year, specifically, and yet still this one I think is a cut above literally all of them.
For sure. So
Control
I think
2
we've
is going to be
touched-
nuts.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
all I
Yeah.
gotta say.
Oh my
Control
God.
2.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I can't wait for Control 2. Oh, it's gonna be so good. Sorry.
That's
go ahead.
announced, right? That's happening.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Excellent. Excellent. That's fantastic. No, you're all good. I think I was just gonna say I think we've exhausted my like questions for non-spoiler talk. Does anyone have any like general shout outs or things we want to say before we put up the spoiler warnings?
Quickly, I will say the Alan Wake 2 to Control comparison, I still think Control is a better game, personally.
Okay.
Yes.
Control, like, and actually, Alan Wake 2 made me appreciate Control even more because Control has so much weird stuff in it, and
Yeah.
it lays so much groundwork for all of these different wacky things that are happening in this one contained game that I'm like, oh man, like the effects that this single game will have on
Oh, particle
hopefully
effects. Oh my god.
oh my, like it's gonna be crazy. Like, you know, like you said, I can't wait for Control 2. And just from a story standpoint, like I can't wait to see how much stuff comes from the original Control, because I can't believe they somehow put together this expanded universe in this one game.
Yeah.
Yeah, the story is developing so much, and also like Control to me is just, as far as gameplay goes, it's a more fun game to play, to interact
Mhm.
with. Like you're just more
Yeah.
mobile, there it's more dynamic than this game, and which I generally prefer that. So yes, I echo that entirely.
Agreed.
Heck yeah. All right, let's put up the big spoiler warnings. You have been warned. If you haven't played Alan Wake 2, go play it. Come back. We'll be waiting, and we're gonna dig right into things. Katie, I'll start with you since I know you haven't finished the game yet. Tell me about your favorite moment in the game.
I mean, is it?
Now
I think
that we
it's
can talk
everyone's.
full spoilers and say
I mean, I
whatever
feel
you
I'm
like
want.
assuming
Yeah.
it's everyone's favorite moment. Don't tell me if there's something else that is a contender for a favorite moment in the second half of the game. But as far as the first half of the game, I'm pretty sure all of our favorite moment, because it's joyful. That's why I was like grinning from ear to ear, and I did not expect there to be a section like a 10-minute section of this game where I would be like grinning and like bopping along and just enjoying myself as the We Sing section of Alan
Heck
Wake's
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Which we've already done so there are sections of like little weird surreal sections where all of a sudden Alan Wake is on a talk show, and this like a fictional talk show, And the first one is surreal just because you don't know what's real or not, and they're telling him things that from his perspective haven't happened, and they're like, yeah, as if it's part of his life, and he's like, what are you talking about? And that's like surreal and weird, and it was fun. And then we get to the second one, and I had heard that the second talk show segment was, like a standout. And so I'm like, all right, so I'm coming in, and then the music kicks in. An original song, something, a Herald of Darkness or whatever it's called.
Herald of Darkness is the name of the song.
Wonderful. And the music kicks in, and there are characters up on these big screens, and the way that it is actually, that is the ground texture that I was talking about, is studio floor that has like that weird poured cement look, and the way the light is bouncing off of it is fantastic. There's these big LED screens that have like characters from the game, and they are gesturing towards you, and they're dancing, and it's like theater, like musical theater, and they're telling the story of Alan Wake in this goofy way, and like modern dance and stuff. And it was one of the goofiest things I have played through in what is otherwise a generally pretty serious game. And I'm like, oh, we're doing this now. This is lovely. And it's so good. And the way that the screens are moving around and they're directing you through the environment. And it's just so, I can't say enough about it. Yeah, it made me so happy. So, I mean, I think that has to be my favorite because I was so joyful in a game that otherwise fills me with dread. Like, happy dread, I guess, but still, it's standout for sure.
That was one that I was so glad I didn't have spoiled for me in any way. Like I had no idea. I didn't know there was going to be any musical bits. I didn't even know to look for the second talk show thing. Like I was literally just like, I guess I'll play the next section of Alan. Hope I don't have to go back in the subway. And then it was like, oh my fucking god! Like it blew me away. I was so impressed.
I had been so hyped for me that for the first couple minutes I was like, okay, we're doing the song thing, and the moving screens are cool. But then I was like, oh, has this been overhyped for me? I don't know. And then the longer it went, the more I just got happier and happier and enjoyed it more and more. And I'm like, nope, this was still great. I still loved it.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite gaming moment experiences ever. So something to know about me: one is I'm a music nerd. Two, I love fictional bands played by real bands, a la Sex Bomb in Scott Pilgrim. All of the actors were musicians. I think Michael Cera had to learn to play bass, but otherwise they all were trained musicians. And so the Old Gods of Asgard, for those who don't know, and you're still here, welcome, I guess, are a fictional band within the Alan Wake and Control universe, played by the actual band Poets of the Fall, who are a Finnish rock band. Alan Wake the first Alan Wake did something like this that was more like part of the world, but like we've hinted at it in Control, and then in this they did things that are just like they break everything in the best way. And this was, I'm a musical theater nerd, I'm a music nerd, and like not only is the song a banger for 13 minutes straight, but it also incorporated great gameplay elements that made it feel natural. All the combat moments in this felt natural. And then you've got the live action actors like Sam Lake doing his little dance that he does in everything. Like it's just like, and shout out to Ilka, who plays, like I said, the physical version of Alan Wake, because his dancing and like lip singing here is, because I believe it's Matthew Vaughn is the actual voice. No, Matthew Peretta is the actual voice of Alan Wake. Like sometimes the lip sync isn't perfect. Most of the time it was, but like here, aces, literally the best I've seen. And like just I have the dance stuck in my head. I've listened to the song once a day since it came out on Spotify. Like I can't say enough good stuff about this, again, because in any other game this would feel weird, but having played Alan Wake and having played Control, I like now forever till the end of time, I can't wait to play Quantum Break and see this moment in Quantum Break. Like there's got to be these standout moments, and like this one, again, in any other game probably would be like, what the hell is this? But in this game I went, yeah, let's go, let's get weirder, let's do it. And like shout out to Poets of the Fall, like the Old Gods of Asgard. I've loved every song they've released. They've put out 5 songs, I think. You can find them all on Spotify, and I do like them all. Take Control from Control is really good, but I think I like this one better just because of how goofy it is. Also, you've got not only Matthew Peretta, but what's the actor's name? David Harewood, who plays Mr. Door,
Yes.
also singing. And like, I've loved him in so many other things. So when I saw he was going to be in this for the long haul, I was like, oh, let's go. And then he sings, and like, it's just, it's so brilliantly done. I can't say enough good stuff about it. And like, I've watched the music video several times too, because it's on YouTube. Just to you get to see more of the human stuff that you can't all pay attention to while playing through it, because it's just the human stuff. And yeah, it's incredible. It is easily the best moment in this game and one of the best moments in video games.
I think my favorite moment within this moment is when you think the song is over.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, that was cool. That was cool. And then it kicks back in and you're just like,
So good.
Let's
go. Yeah.
I really enjoyed this moment, but you guys have said everything that I probably would have said.
Okay.
So I want to talk about one of my second favorite moments, and that is finding Tim Breaker for the first time.
Yeah.
In the like fake New York City or whatever. Like I hear this humming and I'm like, oh God, what is that? And then first I'm like, is that Ati? Like, what's going on? And then I go in and I'm like, oh, there's a guy in here. And then I start to put together, oh, wait, this is the guy that just straight up vanished at the beginning of the game. This is so cool. And like, now I'm like, every time I come across him or every time I hear that humming, I get so excited. And I'm looking at his board and I'm like, what the heck? He's talking about a red-haired woman. We're talking about Jesse Faden in here. We're talking about Mr. Door. What's up with him? Like, just like this, it's just such a small moment in the game that you just recurringly see. And, you know, you'll get resources in there and whatnot. But I'm like, yo, these are like the Easter eggs. Everything, like this guy is setting stuff up here on the side for no reason. And I love that, man. And I love that he's still there. So it's like, oh, what's going to happen in Alan Wake 3, I guess. Or like, how is he going to show up in Control or whatever, or how does this all come together? Like they don't really give you, it's not really a story beat. He's just kind of there, which is really fun. So I love Tim Breaker.
Yeah.
One of my favorite characters.
Played by Sean Ashmore, who is the lead in Quantum Break. And like, I agree. I think it was really cool. I really like him as an actor, and I think he did such a great job. Also, so there was a different Breaker. I think Sarah Breaker was the sheriff in the first game. At first, I thought this was like a gender swap. Like, we're not going to tell you what happened. Eventually, you just find a piece of paper that says, "Oh, I'm her cousin. I'm Sarah's cousin," and like, which is fine. I thought like it was a cool like gender swapping. Like, we don't really know what's going on. No, it was just Sarah left and his cousin took over her. Cousin in a small town took over the same job. But yeah, it was great. Like, same. When I heard the humming, I was like, what is that? Like, immediate dread, right? Because you don't know. Yeah, it was great.
I think that's the moment where like, sorry, go ahead, Katie.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that that's the moment where like the meta-ness of this game clicked for me of like, I didn't play Quantum Break, but I was aware that Sean Ashmore was like the star of it. And I was like, well, he's here as this character now. And then we got the whole Alex Casey, Max Payne comparison. And then we got like, that's when I was like, okay, everything that they're doing is intentional and I'm going to pay attention like no other game before in a way. Which, like, half of the things I probably, like, latched onto probably aren't what I think they are. But in my mind, it's like, this is so symbolic of greater meaning. But very cool stuff.
I'll probably say a couple more things. And then I think I'll probably head out so that you three can continue the discussion. One of my... I don't know that it's a favorite thing, but it was a moment early in the game where I go like, oh, it filled me with dread. It was when in Saga's story, when the reality starts to kind of come apart a little bit, when people are saying like, oh, about your daughter who drowned. And she's like, no, my daughter's fine. And they're like, oh yeah, no, since the accident. And everyone in town has this different perception of reality that Saga does. And you go like, and I don't know where we're going to go with that. Like, will she, is that half reality? Like, I don't know. That might be a thing where she can take control of that and kind of like put that away and go, no, I'm going to take back reality and my kid's fine. Everything's back the way it should be. Or is reality just going to shift entirely and she does not have control? Are we going to do a little bit of both? I don't know, but that moment filled me with dread where I'm like, oh, like reality's shifting everywhere, like not just in Alan's side of the story. Yeah, it really like set expectations that like, no, nothing is safe. Anything can happen at any time. I don't know.
Yeah, that's like a good representation of like what this game is, of just like
Yeah.
Mhm.
don't take anything as like for sure.
Mhm.
Have to be trepidatious.
And
But yeah,
then
sorry, go ahead.
what was the other thing? Oh, the part that I kind of hate. I hate it when it happens. It's happened twice now when the dark presence shows up and is chasing me.
Oh, it's
Oh
the
my god. And
worst.
it's not and nothing
Horrifying.
that weird is happening. Like I'm just running. I'm like, okay, I run here. I have to get from this point to this point. Like but the whole time is like you just never know with this game. That's the
Yeah.
thing, is that it keeps you on edge. So as soon as that music comes in and he's like, it's here again, I'm like, no, not here again. Yeah, it's just, it feels just so much dread. It's terrifying. I don't like it.
It doesn't help
And then-
that Alan's like death animations
gonna
and
say.
like the images
Oh,
that pop up on the
brutal.
screen are like disturbing as all hell.
Brutal, yeah.
And the jump scares and the screen flash jump scares are the things that I think scare me more than anything, where I will
Same.
I'm not good at like screen flashing things like that just come out of nowhere. I just like I get like a fight or flight response. Like I
Yep.
couldn't finish Immortality. I couldn't finish it because I would be scrolling. Light spoilers, Immortality, skip ahead 3 minutes or so. But when you are shifting and the thing switches and the screen switches over, just it switching and I don't know what's going to happen, and then the new thing is shown to me, it like full on fight or flight. I didn't like it. Like I was like, even though I know it was going to happen, I'm like, here, it's going to happen, and then I would be like sweating. So when that
Wow.
happens, it's I don't like it, even though I kind of do. So it's my least favorite part of the game, even though it's a very important part of the game.
That's when I get mad at the game. I'm like, no, you don't
Yes.
get to do this to
I
me.
yell it. Yeah, you yell at it. You're
Yeah.
like, no, you did it again. I hate it so much.
Awesome. Any other shout outs for you, Katie?
No, I don't think so. Not
Okay.
that come to mind. There's a longer discussion to be had for you three. I, enjoy. I'm sure it's fascinating. I'm excited to get there. But no, I think that's it for me.
Brenna, well, thanks for coming on the show. It was great to have you. I'm curious to hear what you think of the full package of Alan Wake 2. But until then, where can listeners keep up with you and all the cool internet goings on you have going?
I'm not sure. I might be on X. I'm kind of on X. I'm more and more shifting to Threads. On either site, I am Lesperak, Lesperak. I talk about video games and I repost cute animal videos. That's pretty much
Love it.
Yeah,
Perfect.
It's good times.
Amazing.
And then Left Behind Game Club, which Jacob is one of the co-hosts and it's been referenced many times. And then Cutscenes, that is a also kind of like a book club format podcast about video game related movies or TV shows, and we see them whether they are good or not. They're getting better. They're starting to get better. The success rate is rising. And I believe only Matt has guested on those so far.
Yes, I guessed it on Detective Pikachu, which was a lot of fun.
Yes. So much fun. So one day we'll get a Hooper and Luke. But and
Heck
you
yeah.
can find either of those on anywhere where you find your podcasts, pretty much.
Amazing. Well, listeners, go check out her stuff. All very entertaining, all good vibes. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate you as always.
Thanks,
you so
Katie.
much for having me. All right.
Bye, Katie.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
night. All right. Okay. Spoiler warnings all about bound. Now we can talk about the rest of the game. So yeah, I'd love to hear kind of like y'all's impressions of the ending of the game. What characters and performances really stood out to you? What comes to mind for you, Matt?
So, favorite characters. First, I got to put this out of the way, and I think Joseph's going to agree. This is my favorite character besides Ati, because Ati is everyone's favorite character. Like, we have to put that to the side. Honestly, like, Marty's performance is incredible, and like being such a control fanatic, him showing up here but not being quite right based on what we know of him control, just like threw me. Like I loved it. So besides him, I really like it's so boring, but I really love Alan Wake. I really love Ilka Villa and Matthew Paredes performances. Also, like I'm a big Casper Darling stan. When you find his book backstage, I was like, yeah, there he is.
I didn't. Oh wait. Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah,
remember
in the
that.
talk
Yeah,
show.
Yeah.
But like I really like there's just like his performance was really good in the first game, but there's something next level about Ilka's performance here. And Alan's my favorite character. Like I like a lot of the other characters here, but I really like I didn't see a lot of the twists coming, even though for some folks it seemed pretty obvious. But like that moment where, and again, we're deep in spoilers here, when we discover when we try to bring Alan the clicker that Alan isn't running from Scratch. Alan is Scratch. They're the same person fighting over one body.
Awesome. That was cool.
Like, and he wastes I think it was Ilmo. No, Yako.
Yeah.
Yako.
Was it?
Yeah. It was Ilmo.
It was Ilmo.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, what the hell? And then I lost my shit. I was freaking out. And that's all. Like a lot of things, it's the writing, it's other things, but it's absolutely the performance too. So like it may be a pretty basic answer, but besides Ati, the best character ever in video games, it's probably Alan Wake's performance.
Cool. I'm gonna go on the opposite side of basic answers. I'm gonna say everybody was my favorite character because like the cast in this is just incredible. That is one thing where I feel like Alan Wake did better than Control, where like almost every cast member in this game, whether you're on with the Wake side with Mr. Door and Sean Ashmore and everybody there, or you're on the Saga side with Yako and Ilmo and Rose and even the old people that are in the sauna. Just incredible dialogue, super believable, super fun and quirky and weird, or kind of unsettling. I loved it all. So 10 out, like I really love the cast in this game. 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
good job, Remedy.
Yeah, I think they all just presented as so interesting, and then as we got to know characters over time, like with the Yako and Elmo the brothers, like I was like, oh, these guys are goofy and weird, and their commercials are hilarious,
commercials
and then their
so good.
Their involvement with Cult of the Tree, and then I was like, no, they can't be bad, but then it's like, oh wait, you're actually doing this for good and using like Cult as like your kind of front and just like weird stuff like that. And
that final commercial in the last area after he died, where there's only one in the commercial, he turns to him like, right, brother? And there's nothing. I was like, killing me.
That's like the book review one during the Deer Fest scene.
Yeah.
I was waiting for Katie to leave because I think the other moment for me that really stood out as far as like character performances was that Deer Fest section where it's like the writing and you're hearing the townspeople like have all these like weird social commentary takes that just feel like so hilarious in context. And such good performances. I also want to give a specific shout out to Melanie Liberd, who played Saga. I thought her performance was really good, and the moment of seeing her and Alan in live action together at the end in the writer's room, it was like, oh, that hit on such a level that I was like not prepared for. And it's funny kind of thinking of this game in context, because it's like, is it brilliant just because they're incorporating live action? But I think it's like the way that they're doing it and the way that they're pacing things and interchanging between gameplay and live action. It's just, it's really something special.
It really is. I also want to say, we didn't talk about the way the game starts, and I think it is important.
Sure.
So you start the game playing as a sort of resurrected Agent Nightingale, who in the first game gets taken by the dark place and you never see again, the dark presence. And like I remember playing the opening of the game and kind of like looking at the screen and then like looking around even though no one's near me and going, what am I doing? Who is this? Like, and it wasn't until it clicked that it was Nightingale, voiced by the Witcher himself, Doug Cockle, which I think is also incredible. And that like that whole opening segment, it's just like I just didn't know what to do with myself. I think it's really brilliant in a way that not like other games have done that kind of misdirect, but I feel like this was something like really just kind of out of left field, because we knew we were playing as two different characters already, and then I'm playing as the corpse of Nightingale, and I went, what is happening here? What's going on?
Yeah, it's so like unnerving and unexpected and really set the tone for what the game is. And the title card coming up after that sequence, it was like, oh my god. Like, to our earlier conversations, like I was in, even though I was like scared and really creeped out, and I was like, I gotta know what this is. Like, I need to know where this is gonna go. So I have a couple questions for both of y'all, having finished the game yesterday, that I've just like kind of been sitting with. Quick fire of a couple. Mr. Door, what's his deal? Like, is he related to Saga? Is there any connection there? Is there any like broader connection of who he is in the universe? Because I thought the ending was going to involve him more directly, but then the reveal of Scratch being Alan himself, I was a little thrown off by that. Not in a bad way, but just like, who is his character to y'all?
I think it's being heavily implied that is Saga's father.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's this whole thing about like something happens and he just disappears. And I think Sean Ashmore even references that. And because he talks about Door a lot. So yeah, I think he'll come back, whether it's Alan Wake 3 or Control 2. He is definitely has something interesting going on with him, and like Sean talking about like the properties of doors and being able to go through these different doors. So yeah, I think it's left vague purposefully. I don't know when he will show back up, but very interesting. I think like the last time he talks to Alan, he's like, oh yeah, like next time you meet me, you won't like me. Or I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something to the point where I was like, interesting, this is going to be cool.
Yeah, so the Saga theory, like him being Saga's dad theory, I've seen in a bunch of places. Also, it should be known that in Quantum Break, there was a character named Martin Hatch, who was played by the late Lance Reddick, who is incredible. And Lance Reddick does get a dedication at the end of this game, and so I believe that, like Sean Ashmore, Martin Hatch or Warland Door was originally supposed to be Lance Reddick, and then he passed.
Okay.
And so now it's still played by an incredible actor, but like that was the initial kind of actor connection, in the same way that Sam Lake is playing Alex Casey and also played Max Payne, and they were very similar.
Got it.
That's the vibe I'm getting through all this crossover, because they've said that Quantum Break, at least at this point, is not directly connected. However, now it's seeming they're hinting at it. But yeah, that's also like in all of the story, we hear about Saga's mom a lot. We hear about how Tor and Odin, they were separated from Saga and her mom because they had a falling out because of her father and because of other things. And so it does seem like they're headed in that direction, but it's not confirmed. I mean, as long as he comes back, I don't really care who he ends up being, but like I'm excited to see him as like a potential villain or anti-hero maybe in the next whatever game we get, whichever he appears in first.
Totally. I was so excited that Thor and Odin ended up being related to Saga. Also, like, this is like cool, meta, weird, like unexpected. Love it.
Oh, and while we're talking about them, the first moment when you profile them and then they take over and their character model shows up in your mind place, that was
super cool.
So cool. Like, and then when Scratch even does it later on, like, I love that the mind place and the writer's room both were like, they played with those. Not even those spaces were safe. Things could happen there too. I thought that was really brilliant. And yeah, their performances were great. And the concert, like when they're playing on the beach, oh, so good. Like,
so
I love
good,
them.
so good. And like we've touched on the music too, but I just want to give a shout out to like all of the original songs and the way they pace the chapters, and then how those like are like influenced by the narrative directly. And there's the song about looping forever and how that's then manipulated throughout the game. Like, I think that's all like just chef's kiss as far as integration of the music.
Agreed.
So I'm curious, going into this conversation about Door, this conversation about Saga, I'd love to hear how both of y'all interpreted the ending of this game and kind of where we left the characters, what you think it means. It's not a loop, it's a spiral. Like, what do you make of all of this? Maybe starting with Joseph.
Yeah, so I actually had to watch a couple like breakdown videos of the ending. And it's a lot deeper than I expected. Like, I mean, I guess I should expect Remedy to go as deep as possible, but apparently this is all allegories for like this archetypal, like psychological model made up by Carl Jung, and it very much mirrors like the archetypes, like the creator, the self, X, Y, and Z. So I think basically what they were saying was like Alan Wake, it's not just him doing the same thing over and over again. It is him like either descending into darkness or ascending to reality or to light or whatever. So he's going to have to figure out how to ascend instead of descend or whatever. And I really did like the super awesome plot twist in the post credits where
Yes.
it turns out like his wife is not actually dead. She didn't actually unalive herself. Like she went back into the dark place because she figured out what was going on. And I think my theory is that like because the game hinted so much at what happened with Thomas Zane and Barbara Jagger that there will probably be some parallel with Alan and why can't I remember her? I want to say like Rachel. Is that her name? What's her
No.
name?
Alice, his wife.
Alice.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's going to be some parallels with that in Alan Wake 3, but I don't know exactly how they're going to deliver it and how the dark place or whatever is going to be used going forward, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, my heart broke when we saw that. Saw throughout the game, they show the like different like art installations that Alice has created because Alan's been torturing her, and as we find out that Alan is Scratch, it was actually Alan unable to control himself, torturing his wife, haunting her, and like she goes back to Bright Falls and then walks off a cliff, and like it cuts, and like the implication is she killed herself by walking off a cliff, but what she really did, we find out in the post credits, is she met with a woman from the from a big government building, got some ideas. And so this hints that there was some contact between maybe Jesse and Alice, or the original director before Jesse and Alice. And she found out some things. And so she went into the dark place. She stepped off that mountain into Cauldron Lake to go after Alan. And yeah, I agree, Joseph. I think it's really cool that they're really working to connect these games. But like the fact that Alice could be the new hero, our next saga, who knows? But like it does seem like they're headed in that direction. And then also like as far as like Saga using the light bullet on Alan, like I don't know where they go with that, right? Like they do the Inception thing of like Saga's calling her daughter and it rings and rings and the game ends, and like obviously they're not going to give us that. Just like, but which is surprising because they did in the first game give us Alice surviving, right, coming out of the lake, and Alan going deeper. And so I'm like that didn't frustrate me. It was just interesting that they gave us less this time.
Yeah, I felt similar. Yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
I was going to say, just quick aside, if you play the Control AWE DLC, you actually do find, I think, like Alice's interview tapes.
Yes, that's right.
When she did visit.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's right.
Cool.
I forgot about that. Yeah. So it might have been with Trench that she interviewed with, but it's unclear. Yeah. But like, still, it just, I really like the ending because I like this kind of bullshit. To put it as frank as possible, like I'm sold on this kind of stuff because Control does the same thing. I don't want to spoil the end of that game, but like it does a similar kind of like you get some resolution, but not much. There's still a lot going on, right? Like, and so like I like that it's open-ended in that way here. I feel like this is more open-ended than Alan Wake 1 was, but I'm still kind of excited and curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, I've seen some discourse that folks are frustrated by the open-endedness, but I feel in a similar place of like, I think it's cool that there's some things that are open to interpretation. I was immediately like, no, I need to know if Saga's daughter, if Loken's okay, because that was like the big driving force. But like, I do think that's a compelling beat to pick up on later in future games. And to your point you made, Joseph, about kind of like the broader discussion of like the symbolism of the art and the creator, like I think there's a lot of like cool meta social commentary within this game that is really smart and really interesting, and I think could get really highfalutin, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels interesting and engaging, and I've seen discourse online of folks talking about how like they feel like the creative journey of Remedy as a studio is represented in Alan Wake's struggle trying to escape from the dark place, and those like real life parallels and all of that. Like, I think that's all super cool and unique and different and interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, well, as I remember, like they tried to make Alan Wake 2. Like Control, I think, was born out of an attempt to make Alan Wake 2 or something, and then but they notoriously had done a ton of work and then kind of failed at making, like they weren't happy and they had to scrap it. And like, so I can totally see that mirroring this, like Alan's multiple attempts at the same thing and seeming to fail every time, but still trying again. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I'm very excited for wherever this goes, and I can't wait for all of the video essays that will probably come out of this, like
for sure,
in a couple months or weeks or whatever. So yeah, they've definitely given us a lot to chew on, and I'm excited to see what the next projects are that feed onto this, like including the DLC. So we won't have to wait too long to get a couple more tidbits.
That's true.
That's a good segue into my final question. I'm curious if y'all have any predictions as far as things we might see in a DLC, plot elements you think might be picked up in Control 2 or in the Max Payne remake that they're working on. Anything come to mind?
I mean, from my perspective, it's like you just never know, man. Like you have no idea what this team is going to throw at you. So I think it's probably going to be something very different, very unexpected, but then also some familiar stuff to kind of keep you grounded in the Alan Wake universe. So especially Night Springs, I feel like that DLC, whatever it is going to be some wacky nonsense, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, they've announced that in 2024 we're getting a Night Springs DLC that's going to allow people to like kind of participate in the TV show Night Springs. And remember that Mr. Dorr says like there's this reboot of Night Springs. We see an ad for it, sort of like the modern Twilight Zone reboots and stuff we've seen. And so they haven't explained how, but they said that you will be able to like interact within Night Springs and it'll have to do with it. And then the other DLC is called The Lake House. And it's more connection to the stuff that's happened with the FBC and with Saga and with Alan, but it's unclear if we'll play as them or if it's a result of what they did. Like they haven't really given a ton of details, obviously, because they don't want to spoil it for those who haven't played the game of like exactly what they'll be about. But it does sound like we may get some resolution from some of the questions in the ending, which should be interesting.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I'm all in on Control 2. Like the minute they announced it, I started freaking out. You know, I'm so excited for that sequel, more so I think than Alan Wake 2, which I loved and was excited for. But that said, I can't even begin to tell you what the narrative will be. I mean, also, for me and Joseph to talk about the narrative of Control 2, we'd have to spoil Control 1, and I don't want to do that for you, Luke. But like,
I like know bits and pieces and a fair bit of it, so if you have a point you want to make, it's all good. But
I mean, it's mostly that we know that Jessie was there to find her brother. She does find her brother,
right?
But there's stuff going on with her brother, and we don't really resolve that. And so, like, I'm curious if the game will pick up with that, if it'll offshoot a different direction, if they'll do a time skip. Like, we really don't know. With the Max Payne remakes, I assume they are going to try and layer in the connections a little more, maybe, because Alex Casey, like, it was Max Payne and everything but name, essentially. Like, they've come out more or less, and not so many words, and said they couldn't call him Max Payne, but like the actor playing him, the actor voicing him, all of that. And so I wouldn't be surprised in like a remake of Max Payne if they like reference Alex Casey or they reference a guy named Alan, like weaving in some more tidbits, because while they say it's only going to be these two franchises, like Tim Breaker alone proves to me that Remedy isn't really telling the truth, that they want to weave in more stuff. So I could see that in the Max Payne remake, them like kind of adding more tidbits.
I want them to double down. I want them to change the name of the Max Payne remake to Alex Casey. Yeah. And we just go full bore.
Yeah, right.
That'd be amazing. I'd also love to see any combination of Jessie and Saga interacting together, because I
Yes.
think Saga proved she was very capable. And the scene, just to touch on it real quick, the final scene where she's in like trapped in her mind place,
Oh
and
my
she has to
God,
break
so
out.
good.
Like that was an instance where I thought that mechanic actually worked really well narratively and made it cool. And I was like, man, Alan really should have just like trusted her earlier on, because she got out of there quite quickly, and he's been stuck in the dark place for 13 years.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah,
True.
I mean, Joseph, it reminded me of that moment in Control, like where Jesse kind of loses it and we get that other part of the game. Like, I
Mhm.
think like it had connections to that. And so like I feel like Luke is onto something here. Also, like
Mhm.
that moment where you have to update the pin board, but you have to find the right pieces. And like at one point you can just keep adding Logan over and over again and it keeps saying she's
Yeah,
drowning.
that was very powerful.
Was just heart-wrenching, like brutal. Like, yeah, that's what I was alluding at before. I'm glad you brought it up, Luke. Like, while Saga's mind place wasn't perfect, everything in the finale with it was so good, because it just preyed upon everything you knew about it and used it against you, and it was great.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think from like a gameplay standpoint, I thought everything culminated really well in the finale, whether it was like the action of Saga trying to summon Alan at the beach with the Old Gods of Asgard playing, and then the mind play stuff. Like that all worked really well for me. All right, well, I think we've touched on all the big things. Any final words? Any final shout outs, questions, things you want to put into the ether?
We talked about it. Great game. Play it.
Yeah, I'm
Hopefully
with
you
Joseph.
played it at this point, but yeah. It's
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
I sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I didn't play Undertale until I watched a spoiler video on it and saw all the crazy stuff and went, oh, I have to play this game, and it made it better for me. So I could totally see someone listening to the spoilers and going, oh, I gotta go check this out, because I really like.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
If you've listened this far and you think, oh well, now I don't have to go see the Wii Sing part, you do, because we failed
Yeah.
to tell you exactly why it's great. But no, I agree with Joseph. Go play this game. Like, go play Alan Wake Remastered. Go play this game. Play everything Remedy's put out. You know, it's just all bangers.
Heck yeah, I'm definitely I want to play Control over the holiday break. Probably I want to go back and squeeze in Quantum Break at some point, probably early next year. But yeah, great game. Can't wait to talk about it more during our Game of the Year conversation, which is coming up very quickly. But until then, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great hanging out with you. Great chatting about this wild game. It was a ton of fun.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here. I pretty much sent a group chat to you guys the minute the show launched and went, so when am I coming on? Because I adore y'all, and it's been a pleasure hanging out with y'all as we do at West and East, and so it's been fun to do that kind of stuff. And so I'm looking forward to doing that again in the near future, but it was a blast to be here. I'm really grateful to come on, especially about this game in particular that I just feel like not enough people were screaming about, because that's all I want to do is just scream about this game all the time.
Heck yeah. Well, I'm glad we could give you a platform to talk about this with us, because it was a ton of fun. But in the meantime, where can listeners keep up with you?
So the best place to find me, I mean, I guess I'm on the hell site, DJ_Stormageddon. I wasn't for a while. I got banned for defending trans people, go figure. But I'm back. I got my account back, so I'm there. Best place to follow me, though, is probably all of my podcasts on Twitter. I host 3 different podcasts: Screen Snark, which both of you have been on; Reignite, which is my BioWare podcast. We moved on to the Dragon Age series. We started with Mass Effect, and then I do the Funny Games podcast with my awesome co-host Jeff Moonen, and both of you have done side quests for that show, which also have been great. And pretty much just go to djstormageddon.com. You can find all my podcasts, the Patreon for Fun and Games, my merch store, my Ko-fi, all that good stuff. Yeah, go check out all that stuff. Also, shout out to Rachel Quirky Shank on Screen Snark and Frankie Badly Lestrange on Reignite. I realized I shouted out one co-host and not the other 2, and they may listen, and I'll feel bad.
All good. Well, all wonderful folks, all worthy of supporting awesome content. Anything to shout out on your end, Joseph?
Go listen to Player Video Game Podcast.
Great podcast.
And then also Can't Pause.com just did a review of Alan Wake 2.
Hell yeah.
Go check out the YouTube channel. I got some end of the year stuff cooking for that.
Amazing. And as always, you can find me. I'm at Lukewarm Lewis on all the socials, and you can check out my other podcast, the Lukewarm Games Podcast, every other week that I host with my wonderful fiance, Claire. This past week, we covered a recent indie release, Thirsty Suitors. That was a ton of fun. So if you're interested in that one, highly recommend it. Otherwise, we are setting our status to away until next time. But until then, you can do 3 things for us. You can give us a follow on Twitter at Crossplay Convos. You can send this podcast to a friend because that's how people hear about podcasts. And you can give us a review on your podcast platform of choice because it really, really does help. And with that, as renowned radio personality Pat Main once said, and that wraps up my list of my favorite park benches in Bright Falls. See y'all later.